Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, Today in History, the show that proves one date on the calendar can contain more chaos, drama, collapse, colonialism, coups, typhoons, assassinations, funerals, dynastic implosions, and uncomfortable French hat traditions than the entire History Channel schedule between 2 a.m. and whatever hour they finally stop rerunning Pawn Stars. November 25th is not a date. It is a historical demolition derby. This day has sunk kingdoms, founded nations, broken empires, and given humanity some very awkward fashion choices. So buckle up, loosen your sense of linear time, and prepare for what can only be described as the universe saying, you know what? Let's shake the Etch-a-Sketch again. Segment 1, Evacuation Day. The Brits finally lose the lease. 1783. November 25th, 1783, the day the British finally packed up and left New York City, ending the Revolutionary War in the most we forgot to read the contract way possible. Imagine your landlord telling you to leave. You procrastinate 7 years, and then you demand to take the curtains with you. That was Britain. And of course, the evacuation wasn't simple. The British had to load thousands of people onto ships, including soldiers, loyalists, and enslaved African Americans who'd been promised freedom. Basically, the world's most depressing cruise ship. Meanwhile, Washington was marching down the island like he was on a very patriotic version of DoorDash, reclaiming street by street before any chaos could break out. And then, the flagpole incident. The British, on their way out, greased the pole and nailed the Union Jack to the top. The ultimate petty goodbye. That's like quitting your job and supergluing the copier shut. A sailor had to climb the pole using makeshift cleats to tear it down. And America went, yes, this is what we celebrate for 100 years. They literally made climb a greased pole a holiday tradition, which explains so much about this country. Evacuation Day eventually died out because America and Britain became friends. And nothing says international diplomacy like burying the holiday where you celebrate dunking on your ally. Segment 2, Suriname's independence. Birth of a nation minus a third of the nation. 1975. November 25th, 1975. Suriname becomes independent from the Netherlands. The Dutch basically said, we'd like to cancel our colonial subscription. And Suriname said, sure, but could you at least leave the Wi-Fi password? Now, most independence movements involve uprisings, rebellions, or wars. Suriname's involved paperwork. But the minute independence was announced, a giant portion of the population said, nope, packed their bags and moved to Amsterdam. 1/3 of the country left. The whole nation was like a Black Friday sale reverse stampede. Suriname gained sovereignty, but lost doctors, teachers, accountants, engineers, basically everyone who could fill out a tax form. This huge demographic split set the stage for coups, dictatorships, and political instability. Imagine trying to start a brand new country, but half your employees walked out during the orientation video. Independence Day, inspiring. The aftermath, less so. Segment 3, Bosnia declares itself for everyone and no one. 1943. November 25th, 1943. In the middle of World War II, 247 delegates gather in Bosnia and say, hey, what if this country belonged to everyone equally? A bold concept, and one history repeatedly said, cute idea, good luck with that. Zavnobic declared Bosnia neither Serbian, nor Croatian, nor Muslim, but the home of all three. A lovely sentiment, a noble sentiment, a sentiment absolutely not shared by anyone with an army at the time. Today, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina celebrates November 25th as Statehood Day, while Republika Srpska treats the date like that weird cousin who keeps inviting you to group chats you didn't agree to. Every year, the holiday becomes a geopolitical Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they want, nobody agrees, and the arguments make Thanksgiving dinner look civil. Segment 4, the conquest of Goa. Portugal goes full Crusade DLC. 1510. November 25th, 1510. Afonso de Albuquerque takes Goa from the Bijapur Sultanate and establishes the heart of the Portuguese Empire in India. Albuquerque shows up like he's installing an overseas patch update. Version 2.0, now with spices, fortresses, and a cathedral named after St. Catherine. Goa becomes the Roman Catholic capital of Asia, and Albuquerque's strategic alliances were basically, we'll protect the Hindus, massacre the Muslims, and call it diplomacy. Nothing says empire like treating foreign policy like a badly balanced RPG. But it worked. Goa remained Portuguese for 451 years. That's longer than the United States has existed. When Portugal finally lost Goa in 1961, it was like someone realizing the house key they've been carrying for 4 centuries doesn't fit anything anymore. Segment 5, the Anti-Comintern Pact. Axis powers swipe right, 1936. November 25th, 1936. Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan signed the Anti-Comintern Pact, which is basically the geopolitical equivalent of 2 school bullies saying, let's agree to both hate the same kid. They claim it's about opposing the Communist International, but really, it's about forming what we now call the Axis, aka the worst Avengers. The pact lasts until 1939, when Germany suddenly signs a surprise friendship treaty with the Soviet Union, the diplomatic equivalent of cheating. Japan reacts like a teenager who just found out their crush is dating their dentist. Shock, betrayal, and an immediate government resignation. The whole alliance was less ideology and more temporary convenience, which is probably true for most world history and definitely true for every group project you've ever been forced into. Segment 6, the Mirabal Sisters, martyrs who ended a dictatorship, 1960. November 25th, 1960. Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa Mirabal, Las Mariposas, are assassinated by the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. Trujillo wanted to silence them. Instead, he accidentally made them immortal. The Mirabal sisters fought for democracy, dignity, and freedom. Trujillo fought for ego, oppression, and the ability to see his own face on every wall. The sisters were murdered, their deaths staged as a car accident, which fooled absolutely no one. It was the least convincing cover-up since every politician who's ever said, I was hacked. Their assassination backfired spectacularly, igniting national outrage and speeding the dictator's downfall. Decades later, the UN named November 25th the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, because sometimes history gets it right, though usually it takes a few centuries. Segment 7, the White Ship Disaster, Royal Titanic, but drunker, 1120. November 25th, 1120. The White Ship sinks in the English Channel, killing William Adelin, the heir to King Henry I, along with almost the entire young aristocracy. Historians describe the ship as overloaded with nobles and full of alcohol. So imagine a medieval frat party on a boat. What could possibly go wrong? The ship tries to race the king's ship, smashes into a rock, and goes down. William escapes in a lifeboat, but decides to turn back when he hears his sister screaming. The boat capsizes. Everyone drowns. England enters a 19-year civil war called the Anarchy, which is exactly what it sounds like. Nobles fighting, peasants suffering, and the country becoming the early prototype for every bad HBO medieval drama. One drunken nautical disaster literally rewired European history. That's the power of November 25th. Even the shipwrecks change dynasties. Segment 8, Yukio Mishima's final performance art piece, Coup and Seppuku, 1970. November 25th, 1970. Yukio Mishima, legendary novelist, extremely jacked man, and part-time emperor restoration enthusiast, leads a tiny militia into a Japanese military base. He seizes an office, delivers a passionate speech calling for a return to imperial glory, and everyone laughs at him. It is the only coup attempt in history that ended with the entire army going, nah, we're good. Realizing no one is joining him, Mishima performs ritual seppuku, deliberately ending his life in a highly choreographed political theater piece. Critics are still debating if it was a protest, an artistic statement, or the world's most dramatic resignation letter. Japan moved on. Historians moved on. But November 25th said, let's add another layer of intensity to this date just for fun. Segment 9. Einstein presents General Relativity. Universe.exe updated. 1915. November 25th, 1915. Albert Einstein presents the final field equations of general relativity, the mathematical blueprint for how gravity actually works. This was the day the universe got patch notes. Newton's gravity? Stuff pulls other stuff. Einstein's gravity. Space is bending like a waterbed at a sleepover. Einstein solves Mercury's weird orbit, predicts light bending around stars, and generally rewrites reality. The man basically walked into the Prussian Academy and said, everything you know about space is wrong, but don't worry, so am I most days. And because this is November 25th, of course this intellectual supernova shares a date with shipwrecks and dictators. History has no category filters. Everything goes in the same drawer. Segment 10. Benjamin Banneker, Science as a Clapback. Benjamin Banneker publishes his almanac and then mails it to Thomas Jefferson. Like, hey, remember when you said black people were intellectually inferior? Here's 400 words and some astronomical calculations proving you wrong. This is the most polite academic smackdown in American history. The man used star charts as evidence. Today, someone would subtweet Jefferson. Banneker went, hold on, let me compute the lunar phases real quick. Part of his legacy burned in a tragic fire the day he died, but his letter to Jefferson survived, surviving fire, prejudice, and the bizarre American habit of only rediscovering brilliant black scientists centuries later. Segment 11. Typhoon Nina. Nature deletes the Philippines. November 25th, 1987. Typhoon Nina slams into the Philippines with Category 5 fury. Winds over 160 miles per hour. Pressure so low, it needed therapy. Entire towns were flattened. More than 800 people died. Tens of thousands were left homeless. If November 25th had a slogan, it would be, history, but louder than necessary. The storm forced the country to reevaluate disaster planning, which, given how often the Philippines gets hit, meant starting a very ugly conversation. Maybe we shouldn't rebuild exactly where the water goes. Segment 12. St. Catherine's Day. France invents Hat Day and misery. November 25th is also the feast of St. Catherine, patron saint of unmarried women and hat makers, because the Catholic Church used to just assign saints like a confused HR manager. In France, Catherinettes, unmarried women over 25, wear absurd green and yellow hats, which seems cruel until you realize Parisian fashion designers immediately took over and said, what if humiliation but couture? Today, the tradition is a celebration of the hat industry, feminism, and the enduring French belief that any social ritual becomes classy if the accessories are expensive enough. Segment 13. JFK's State Funeral. A nation in black and white. November 25th, 1963. John F. Kennedy is laid to rest, and the entire world watches. It becomes one of the most iconic funerals in global history. World leaders cram into Washington like it's Comic-Con for grief. The riderless horse, the slow procession, and then the salute. Little John raising his tiny hand toward his father's casket. America collectively, emotionally imploded. If the Revolutionary War gave November 25th patriotic triumph, JFK's funeral gave it solemn tragedy. This date contains multitudes, all of them intense. Segment 14. The death of Fidel Castro. Cold War, game over. November 25th, 2016. Fidel Castro dies at 90. In Havana, mourning. In Miami, fireworks and car horns. Nothing brings out emotional whiplash quite like the legacy of a man who ran a communist island for half a century. Castro died 60 years to the day after setting sail on the yacht Granma to start the Cuban Revolution. Historians call that symmetry. Cuba calls it fate. Miami calls it about damn time. His death didn't end the regime, but it ended an era. A long, complicated, violent era wrapped in idealism, oppression, cigars, and enough speeches to fill several rainforests worth of paper. In conclusion, November 25th is not just another date. It is a cosmic blender set to puree. It's a day where kingdoms drown, empires leave, nations are born, theories rewrite reality, dictators fall, storms erase coastlines, and tiny children deliver history's most heartbreaking salute. It's a day that says, humanity, please stop touching things. You're going to break them. And humanity replies, hold my beer. This has been Kleppers Corner Today in History. Go forth, stay curious, and if you see a greased flagpole, maybe don't climb it unless the entire nation is waiting on you.